The 1960s were a strange, shifting decade for horror. Caught between Gothic ghosts and modern paranoia, old castles were crumbling, but new terrors were being born in suburban living rooms, roadside carnivals, and decaying small towns. Filmmakers pushed boundaries with tiny budgets, bold ideas, and imagery that still echoes through today's horror. Tonight on Silver Shivers, we count down 10 classics from the 1960s that still chill the spine and haunt the imagination. Long before slashers, horror explored the real monsters hiding behind polite society. The Flesh and the Fiends opens in 1828 Edinburgh, a city obsessed with science and progress but short on morality. Dr. Robert Knox, played by Peter Cushing at his cold, intellectual best, has one great problem. Science needs corpses, and corpses are hard to come by. Enter Burke and Hare, two petty criminals who discover that fresh bodies fetch a better price than dead ones dug from the ground. Their partnership begins with shovels and turns more sinister. Each murder feeds the doctor's obsession with knowledge, and each dissection brings him closer to moral ruin. But The Flesh and the Fiends isn't a gore fest. It's a descent into the ethics of progress, a grim reminder that civilization has always had a body count. Filmed in gritty black and white, the movie feels more like a confession than a horror story. Intimate, suffocating, and far too believable. It's not about monsters hiding in shadows. It's about the respectable men who pay them. Even now, the tension between science and conscience gives it a chill that hasn't faded in 60 years. Few films capture the atmosphere like this one. A thick fog rolls over the town of Whitewood, a forgotten New England town where time doesn't pass, it lingers. Nan Barlow, a curious college student obsessed with witchcraft, arrives here for research at the suggestion of her charming professor, Alan Driscoll, played by Christopher Lee with that trademark mix of sophistication and menace. He encourages her to visit the old village to study the remnants of witchcraft. He doesn't mention that Whitewood is still practicing it. When Nan checks into the Raven's Inn, something already feels wrong. The innkeeper smiles too long. The townsfolk appear and vanish like mist. Every door creaks as if sighing, and beneath the town square lies a secret no textbook could ever record. A coven that never died, only waited. The City of the Dead was made on a small budget, but you'd never know it. The shadows feel sculpted, every cobblestone glistens like bone under moonlight, and the black and white cinematography traps the viewer in a perpetual midnight. It's witchcraft by way of film noir, elegant, eerie, and far more atmospheric than its modest origins suggest. The City of the Dead proves that atmosphere can be more suffocating than gore. In a storm of torchlight and shrieking wind, a witch is executed and cinema is reborn. Mario Bava's Black Sunday opens with a vision straight from a nightmare. A spiked iron mask hammered onto the face of Princess Ace of Aida, condemned for sorcery and betrayal. Her curse spills out like smoke, a promise of vengeance that will echo for centuries. 200 years later, lightning strikes her tomb and cracks the seal. Inside, the witch awakens, her empty socket staring through centuries of rot, ready to claim the living body of her descendant, Katya, both played by the haunting Barbara Steele. The dual performance, pure innocence versus ancient evil, defines the film's dark beauty. Bava, trained as a cinematographer, paints with light, moonbeams through fog, flickering torches over stone crypts. What could have been cheap exploitation becomes tragic poetry about revenge, beauty, and decay. There's almost no blood, but every frame feels drenched in it. This was Italy's awakening, the birth of Gothic horror as an art form. The ocean doesn't care if it drowns you, and neither does Night Tide. Hopper stars as Johnny Drake, a lonely sailor on leave who falls for Mora, a carnival performer who plays a mermaid for tourists. But under the soft neon and carousel music, Johnny begins to suspect Mora isn't pretending, that she's something older, darker, and hungry. Their romance drifts between dream and nightmare. Sea spray, carousel music, and an undertow of death. The film never needs jump scares. The dread comes from what's not shown, the quiet spaces between heartbeats where love curdles into fear. Director Curtis Harrington turns the American boardwalk into something mythic, full of ghost lights and rusted rides. It's a romantic tragedy dressed as a horror film, quietly revolutionary in tone. A love story doomed by the pull of the tide. Some nightmares don't scream, they hum. That's the tone Carnival of Souls captures perfectly. After surviving a car accident that kills her friends, Mary Henry tries to start over in a new town, working as a church organist. But the dead don't let go so easily. A pale-faced man begins appearing wherever she goes, silent, grinning, waiting. The townspeople seem distant, like ghosts themselves, and Mary drifts through the story as though she's already halfway gone. Made for just $30,000 by industrial filmmaker Herc Harvey, it was shot in abandoned dance halls in the ghostly Saltair Pavilion of Utah. Its grainy monochrome and haunting organ score make it feel like a half-remembered dream. There are no jump scares, only the slow existential terror of a woman who might already be dead. Carnival of Souls didn't find its audience until decades later, but now it stands as a cornerstone of psychological horror. It became the blueprint for psychological indie horror from Jacob's Ladder to The Sixth Sense. It's proof that horror doesn't need gore or budget, just the right melody of loneliness, echoing forever in an empty park. Before Italian horror became drenched in neon blood and Baroque nightmares, it began here, with The Girl Who Knew Too Much. Directed by Mario Bava, the godfather of Italian horror, this sleek black and white thriller introduced audiences to a new kind of terror, part mystery, part murder, all style. Nora Davis, an American tourist in Rome, whose vacation turns into a waking nightmare. After witnessing a murder on the Spanish Steps, she wakes in a hospital only to be told it never happened. Everywhere she goes, people dismiss her story, except for the man who might be the killer himself. Bava's camera glides through narrow streets, marble staircases, and shadowed alleys with hypnotic precision. Light and darkness dance across the frame like co-conspirators, and every close-up feels just a little too close. There's no gore, no monsters, just paranoia building until it feels claustrophobic. What Psycho did for American thrillers, The Girl Who Knew Too Much did for Europe. It laid the foundation for the giallo genre. Even without the later genre's signature violence, this film already had the most important ingredient: fear wrapped in elegance. If The Girl Who Knew Too Much was the spark, Black Sabbath was the explosion. Another Bava masterpiece, this three-part anthology mixes psychological terror with the macabre. The first, The Telephone, follows a young woman tormented by threatening calls from an unseen stalker. A story pulsing with paranoia and sexual tension far ahead of its time. The second, The Wurdelak, stars horror legend Boris Karloff as a patriarch returning home after possibly turning into a vampire. And the third, The Drop of Water, tells of a nurse who steals a ring from a corpse and unleashes something dreadful in her home. Each story feels distinct. One modern, one gothic, one supernatural, yet together they form a tapestry of dread. Bava saturates every scene in color: deep reds, violet shadows, emerald gloom. It's a reminder that horror can be both grotesque and gorgeous. Black Sabbath wasn't a huge success in its time, but it became a cornerstone for anthology horror, and a haunting reminder that nightmares come best in threes. Some houses don't just remember, they listen. Robert Wise's The Haunting remains one of the greatest ghost stories ever filmed, not because of what it shows, but because of what it refuses to. A group of paranormal researchers gathers at Hill House, an imposing mansion with a history steeped in tragedy. Among them is Eleanor Lance, a lonely woman seeking purpose, played by Julie Harris in one of horror's most haunting performances. As the nights stretch on, Eleanor begins to hear things: knocking in the dark, voices calling her name, laughter that isn't there. The others dismiss it, but the house knows her. Doors buckle, walls breathe, and every shadow seems to lean closer. You never see a ghost, you hear it in your bones. The Haunting set the standard for haunted house cinema and influenced everything from The Conjuring to Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. It's not just a ghost story, it's an echo of loneliness that never stops calling. Evil doesn't always knock. Sometimes it moves in next door. Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby isn't just one of the defining horror films of the 1960s. It's a cultural turning point, a story where paranoia and possession become indistinguishable. Mia Farrow stars as Rosemary Woodhouse, a young woman who moves into an ornate New York apartment with her husband Guy, a struggling actor. The neighbors are charming, if intrusive, always offering strange drinks, advice, and smiles that last too long. When Rosemary becomes pregnant, she's overjoyed until the pain starts. The dreams turn violent. The faces around her begin to feel wrong, and suddenly everyone in her life seems to know more about her baby than she does. Polanski turns the familiar into the uncanny. The pastel walls, the cozy kitchen, the lullabies, they all rot from the inside out. Rosemary's Baby was controversial when it premiered, but it redefined horror's power. It proved that fear doesn't always live in haunted houses or crypts. Sometimes it grows quietly behind locked doors in the comfort of home. Then came the film that ended an era and began another. It started in a graveyard and ended with a revolution. George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead didn't just redefine horror, it changed cinema forever. Shot on a tiny budget in rural Pennsylvania, it looked like another late-night creature feature. But beneath the black and white grit and the clumsy gore was something new, something alive. A woman named Barbara visits a cemetery with her brother Johnny. Their quiet argument is cut short when a shambling figure attacks. Slow, silent, hungry. Barbara flees to an isolated farmhouse where a handful of strangers barricade themselves inside, unaware that the dead are rising across the country. The zombies are relentless, yes, but the humans are the real tragedy. They argue, turn on each other, and seal their own fate long before the creatures break in. For 1968 audiences, this was pure anarchy. No heroes, no redemption, no safe ending. The gritty black and white film stock makes it feel documentary real, and the ending, bleak, abrupt, and unforgettable, still hits like a gut punch. Romero didn't just invent the modern zombie. He forced audiences to see themselves in the mob. Night of the Living Dead closed the 1960s by burying its optimism 6 feet deep. The 1960s were a crucible, where horror evolved from Gothic legends into modern nightmares. Witches gave way to psychopaths, fog-shrouded villages to suburban apartments, and cinema learned that terror could be beautiful, tragic, and real. If you crave more forgotten gems and dark classics, subscribe to Silver Shivers. And until next time, keep the lights low and the reels turning.